welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks ? Kicks.
Hey, just like that, back and set for UFC Fight Night, Lewis versus Spivak. Listen, the chat is already popping off. Cody, old blind dog, branch above, Fluffy Stuff HD.
How's it going, everybody?
We got Cristela Garcia hanging out. Hopefully you don't know Fernie Garcia. I did not pick Fernie to win earlier on in this week. French Potato, Cole Hughes is hanging out at the gym. Let's go. It's perfect timing. Get on the elliptical, and instead of watching the news, you can watch us. Tangy Manis! Who's the locks? Go find the other channels that use those words. Corey McGregor's hanging out saying, Matt does not use that thing. Well, that's weird because that's
what
right.
What are you talking about?
Phoenix saying smash the like button. Lord Nikon, what's poppin'? Brand new whip. I'm not going to sing Jack Harlow on the channel, but Matt, listen, it's going crazy. Kurt Tyre's saying you boys ready for Canada to have a PFL champ. Olivier Aubin-Mercier is definitely going to win that damn thing over Stevie Ray. I can't wait for the PFL championships. And just so everybody knows, I'm off on vacation next week, and I'm not doing a damn thing fight-related. So that's just the way that's going to go, Matt.
I'm really excited for this last card that we do have because we have had a bit of a staggered end of the year. It does seem like there's been a couple breaks in between some of these cards, but I think we have one of the better Fight Night cards that we've had in recent memory. I know the pay-per-views have been very stacked. Some of these Fight Night cards haven't been the deepest, but again, I said this on the last couple of pay-per-views. My favorite type of fights are you have that one established longtime veteran where you kind of know where they're at in their career. They've lost to a lot of the good guys in the division. They beat a lot of the good guys in the division, and they're just sort of left in this weird limbo, and that's where Derek Lewis finds himself right now. A lot of people remember him fighting against Daniel Cormier for the heavyweight title of the world. That is the apex of the sport, and unfortunately for Derek Lewis, it hasn't really been the greatest run ever since that title shot. He's been a guy who can beat those up-and-comers and lose to some other ones, and I think for Sergey Spivak, he's been an interesting fighter because he was that hyped-up prospect, suffered his own losses, but he's really been able to reinvent himself and kind of rekindle the hype that he once had. So I'm really excited for this main event. I think it's going to be a great fight.
Well, and a lot of people kind of split on what are the motivations for Derek Lewis at this point. I mean, 26-10 with no contest. Most people saying he does well against wrestlers. He couldn't do it at the Apex, and not actually at the Apex. It was at MSG, if I'm not mistaken, when he took on Daniel Cormier. But what I mean about that is that main event was thrown together really quickly. It just did not favor Derek Lewis one bit, but he did get that opportunity at the title, so I'm eager to see how it plays out. John Choi just trying to finish out the contract. We'll see how that one goes. And Charles saying, remember when Derek Lewis beat Francis Ngannou? How could we forget?
And it's interesting you bring that up, John Choi, because I never thought about it until you worded it like that. I wonder if Derek Lewis is the type of guy who, once he's done with his UFC contract, would try to pursue those...
Go back to Bellator.
But not even back to Bellator. Just pursue those kind of combat sports ventures, if you will, and almost get into like a celebrity boxing. Because like Hasim Rahman Jr. is fighting Greg Hardy.
320-pound Greg Hardy.
You know what I mean? And like Greg Hardy I know is in the NFL, but he didn't have the greatest run in MMA. And like Derek Lewis was on Hot Ones, okay? He's one of the few MMA fighters that you can put on pretty much any show, and he's going to be able to get laughs and kind of transcend just the MMA audience. So I wonder if Derek Lewis is one of those fighters who, when he's done with his MMA career, is going to seek some of those larger paydays outside of the sport.
We'll see how it plays out. Again, Matt, as you mentioned, a big card coming up today. Not a lot of divisional relevance in terms of the rankings. You have Jennifer Maia, who's ranked, taking on Maryna Moroz, unranked, of course. And then in the main event, the two ranked guys at heavyweight. But we'll throw it on over to the fight of the night screen, talk about it a little bit, and then get right into those picks. Because if you look at this fight on the night screen, this fight stayed. Now, a lot of people were out there in the chat at the start of the week. Cody Brundage, Adolfo Vieira. That's a fight of the night. You're friggin' right it was. and then it fell out. But Andre Fialho taking on Muslim Salikov. Will we see a reinvigorated Salikov? Will we see him with his wrestling shoes on? What do you kind of think of this one? Because if these two guys strike at their pinnacle, this is a great fight.
I think it should be, and I just think Fialho and the type of striker that he is going to bring the fight out of Salikov. Salikov's a guy who is a great striker, but he's a little bit better on the back foot than he is offensively leading the dance.
Really weird.
Exactly, like he is kind of like the flip side of what you would assume a striking expert is, but I think the aggressiveness of Fialho is going to make Salikov into one of those strikers, and maybe even force out some of those offensive shots. So I just think the overall aggressiveness of Fialho is really going to make this a fun fight, but I will be curious to see if Salikov does go for some of those early takedowns, because we know that's something he has in his game.
Todd's excited about the Polar Bear versus the Black Beast. Clay's hanging out in the chat. I think it's going to be a great fight. And again, for Fialho's last time out, didn't look great when he was outside of the range against Jake Matthews. He's going to have to get inside of that pocket against Salikov to get the win, and that makes it tricky. We have Jack Della taking on Danny Roberts. Now, normally you don't pick a fight of the night when one guy's a minus 700 favorite, but out of this fight, like I even saw that little snippet where Dana White's breaking down the card. He had a lot to say about Danny Roberts. It actually featured quite a bit, and he's like, listen, this guy's great with his kicks. He's great in the pocket. He's good on the ground. That's what he said. Not really.
He can wrestle a bit, but like, it's not really the thing I think about when I think about Danny Roberts, but I'm happy to hear that. I didn't see that, but I'm happy to hear that, because I do think this is a fight that deserves heavy promotion, because in the welterweight division, it is yet to kind of have its metamorphosis, if you will, because we've seen a lot of these divisions where you have this batch of new contenders. Think about lightweight right now. There's all these great fighters who are making their way up towards the title. Islam just won the title, so you have a brand new champion. Welterweight is starting to have one of those developments, and Jack Della Maddalena seems to be at the forefront of it. But like you had said, with Danny Roberts, he is well-rounded enough and he's durable enough to where he's not going to beat himself, and he's going to get a good fight out of Della Maddalena to where we're going to learn a lot more out of this new prospect.
Kind of beat himself in that fight against Ramazan Amir. But if we look at the comments, Matt, I got a couple that I got to go through. Hispanosaurus Rex saying, Andre got slept not too long ago. You're going to like this. Salikov got slept more recently than Fialho got slept, and neither one of them got slept, but I mean, Andrea, it was definitely worse than Salikov's TKO loss. The other one with MPTV talking about, I thought it was Pop-'em Popcorn. No, it's Pop and Popcorn. Pop and Popcorn. And I'll tell the story one more time. How old were we? I was like 10, 11, 12, something like that. Matt's 4 years younger.
So 7, so...
Put that in context. We went up to the dining cart on the Downeaster, you know, the train between Portland and Boston. And
it's a good time.
Matt asked for an orange pop, and the man behind the counter was not pleased. It's a soda. You want an orange soda? So, yeah,
that man gaslit me about what carbonated drink I wanted on a train. And that's not an experience I wanted to have as a child, but here we are, and that's formed me into the man that I am today.
James Lloyd with a great super chat. We're going to take the time here. So, am I crazy to think it's one of the most well-matched cards beside the Jack Della fight? Is there any fight where you'd be surprised if the underdog won? Probably the Jack Della fight. So, James Lloyd, I'm going to say that right there. But I was going to actually start the show by saying this. So, super great that you started off with the super chat there. And the fact that there's a lot of fights that are really, really close in terms of the odds. This is one of those cards that whether you get it right, whether you get it wrong, you end up at 500 or you have a great card. It really is a tricky one when fights are lined that closely to pick the right or the wrong. If you're picking a fighter that's a minus 120 and you get that right and somebody goes out there, and I'm sure you guys saw it from me this week, but, oh, you guys only pick favorites. If you pick minus 120s all day, that's not easy.
No,
like those are
close.
Yeah, those are really close. If you're out there picking minus 400s all day, like a Bellator card, the undercard where everybody's like a minus 550, minus 1000.
It's like a contender series card.
That's easy, but when they're cards like this, it's not very easy.
And I thought I would receive a little bit more blowback for being as excited as I was for this card at the start of the week, because I didn't hide it whatsoever. Like, I genuinely do think this is one of the, like you said, more well-matched cards of the year. There's a lot of exciting fights from the bottom of the card to the top of the card. When there's 5, 6, 7 fights that we could discuss being on the fight of the night screen, because there's a genuine opportunity for them to go all 15 minutes and be a great matchup, you know it's going to be a really good card. Like, Miles Johns is fighting Vince Morales, and that's going to be a sick fight. And we haven't even mentioned that one yet, so I think it will be a really fun and deep card.
CT710, also appreciate your super chat right there. So when it does come down to this card, again, now you have 12 fights. As we said, the Brundage fight against Vieira, we broke it down, and then on, what was it, Monday, Tuesday? I think it was Tuesday, that fight fell out. So we'll see how it goes for both of those guys as the rematch, but we start this card down at the bottom. Natalia Silva taking on Tereza Bleda. And Matt, I'm going to venture a guess and say, and people aren't going to believe it, that unranked women's flyweights, this is going to be our most viewed single video of the week.
Really? Why is that?
A lot of people are split on this one, and a lot of people are talking about Natalia Silva in the matchup. And Tereza Bleda is the underdog, and full transparency, we picked her at the start of the week. We talk about both fighters glowingly, and then we make the pick. But when you look at this fight for Natalia Silva, I said it again at the start of the week, and I'll repeat myself now. She didn't look like the same fighter she did on the regional scene when she was with Jungle Fight. She took 3 years off? It was 2.5 years, broke her ulna in the process, came back. Her striking didn't look the same. Her grappling, her defensive grappling didn't look the same. A little bit of a threat of the takedown against Jazavicius to make her think of the striking. Natalia Silva cut straight back and forth in her fights on the regional scene. She was bopping on the outside Israel Adesanya until the 5th round against Alex Pereira. So for Natalia Silva, it looked like a whole new fighter her last fight out. Tereza Bleda, fight in, fight out. She's a fighter that's going to press a pace, take you down, rinse and repeat, good top pressure. And if you get back up, well, she's going to chain her takedown. So for me, I absolutely love this fight. I think this is going to be a great one. I see Kurtar saying low-level women's MMA, just take the dog. I disagree with you, Kurtar, on this one. Just this fight. I agree with you for the most.
Took the dog.
That statement I agree with for the most part, but I think both of these women are going to find themselves in the top 15 at some point. So I don't think this is low-level women's MMA at all.
I think we're going to learn a lot off of this fight, though. I think it will be difficult for the loser to maybe get up into that top 15, but I agree with you on the winner and where they could be projected. Because what I do like out of Bleda is she has something you can't teach no matter what, and that's just being massive for this weight division. That is going to help her get at least close to the rankings. We have seen a lot of fighters use their physicality, use their strength, use their wrestling, which Bleda is very skilled at, to be able to just go out there and physically dominate their opponents. If you're good enough defensively on the feet to where you're not getting stunned, you're not getting cut, you're not getting knocked out and really hurt badly on the feet, normally you can use that wrestling and that control to your benefit, because I don't realistically see a finish in this fight. I don't think either one's going to be able to get a submission off their back. Maybe if Bleda is able to really dominate her with her wrestling, but again, I think that's even a little bit far-fetched for her to have that big of an advantage on the mat. I just think Bleda is going to be able to have enough control with her wrestling and with her clinch time to make up for the deficiencies that she's going to have on the feet.
And it's a little bit spooky scary, because if you look at it for Natalia Silva, I mean, the ground can be lava. You look at her wins, 6 of them by armbar. That's definitely a tricky situation. But if you look at it for Bleda, the win that she had over Maybelly Lima over with Octagon, Lima was a winning fighter on Dana White's Contender Series. Edna Oliveira was somebody else that you go back and you watch those fights and you can see some transferables. The Mummy Cats won 11 straight fights last week.
Nice.
Had our last show of the year. Got some nookie and a little extra cash in the venue. Gonna keep the train rolling, boys. The chalk in the pipe. It will be laid. There's a pin from
Mummy Cats had a good week.
There's a pin from the Mummy Cats somewhere over on the other it's down below. You're gonna have a hard time finding it. But regardless, check out the Mummy Cats. Great tunes if you're into that. And listen, for the Mummy Cats, if the vinyl comes out, let me know. If I've maybe been living under a rock and it's already out there, I feel stupid, but I would love to buy an LP. But yeah, in this fight, I like Bleda with the takedowns. I think it's one of those ones where it's more of a fade on the favorite than it is anything else. But Silva open plus 100. The line corrected itself. She's a minus 170. Tereza Bleda open minus 120, plus 140. We have a look at your picks over on the Instagrams, and Matt in the Instagram story at Fight Night Picks as it loads up on my phone on professional. 54% have Bleda, 46% with Silva. Silva looked greater last time out. It's whether or not you think Bleda is on that level with Jazavicius, or really where, vinyl for the EP is out. Vinyl for the album is being pressed. Look at that. Go. So now I know. I have Bleda, but I think it's going to be a good fight. And again, the people that say this is lower level women's MMA, Cynthia Calvillo is still ranked 14th in this division. And Moroz, as the week's gone on, they ranked her 15th. So now we have an extra ranked fighter.
There's not a pick I've made in the history of this channel that I feel worse about that I'm not switching. I just want to make that abundantly clear.
That's fair. Fernie Garcia is taking on Brady Hiestand, and in this fight, this is a good one. I mean, you look at both of these guys, and it's a clash of styles. Fernie Garcia is that move forward, walk forward in combination, pepper in your power shot type of boxer. He does not throw kicks, and I know I took umbrage with that at the start of the week, but he doesn't really throw kicks at all, and I'm talking to any of the 3 levels. For Garcia, it really is, I'm going to defend your takedowns, I'm going to beat your ears in, I'm going to finish you. And for Brady Hiestand, you look at it, and a lot of people say, well, he fought a bad level competition as a pro. You're friggin' right he did. I mean, out of his 5 wins, 0-24 is the record. He beat Josh Reddinghouse, who was 16-5 on the Ultimate Fighter. He beat Vince Murdoch, who was 12-4. And people go, well, Craig, Vince Murdoch. I mean, he lost that fight, and then he fought a guy who was 3-7 on the regional scene and got finished. And I would say, yeah. But don't forget, right before the Ultimate Fighter, Vince Murdoch was supposed to be in the UFC before they had, like, he had those brain scans that didn't work out for him, and he couldn't take the fight. So you look at it, Kiko is saying get Brady a fight with Jay Ellis. I mean, Jay Ellis beat Gerald Meerschaert, and Gerald Meerschaert beat Jay Ellis. So, hey, things go hand in hand. But when you look at this one, Garcia with the boxing, Hiestand with kind of the more complete package. Hiestand also coming off of over a year away due to an ACL injury. MCL, meniscus were injured as well, but it was majority, his ACL that caused him the issues. So we'll see if he's rebuilt, reborn, replenished. He's only 23 years old.
My pick on this fight comes down to me fading the whole entire show of The Ultimate Fighter more than anything. I'm just going to be completely honest about that. Brady Hiestand, like you had said, has good wins over guys under strange circumstances, because that's the thing about getting wins on The Ultimate Fighter. A, it's considered an amateur fight. B, they're 2 rounds. And C, it's not like you get a full training camp. Like, you're training with the coaches in a group environment. Like, there are some weird asterisks that you can put on that performance. So for Brady Hiestand, even if you look at the loss that he had, I'll kind of do the flip side, looked pretty good in a losing effort against Ricky Turcios, but the problem is, like I just said, I kind of have to fade that whole season, and what we're going to see out of Ricky Turcios later today, I guess the good thing is, we're just going to kind of know what we know about both of these fighters after today, because let's say Hiestand does look really good, and Turcios is also able to get a really good win, then maybe I won't change my opinion about both of those fighters moving forward, but I think for Hiestand, he's going to have to really start just overall getting a better striking game. If he was the one who was able to implement more kicks, or just have a better way from getting from point A to point B, because I like his wrestling a lot, and I like it in this matchup. I think he's going to have to use it. I just don't know if him loading up on some of those big power shots is going to be enough for the in-betweens if he's not really able to control a lot with his takedowns.
Trollin's hanging out in the chat. You just completely undid your reasoning for taking Ricky Turcios over Kevin Natividad right there by saying the Ultimate Fighter is a fade.
No. I think Ricky Turcios showed me a little bit more. Again, neither one of these...
The fight when he was minus 200 and he looked terrible?
Again, neither one of these guys look great, Craig. That's my whole point. We're going to learn a lot more about these guys. I just think Fernie Garcia on the feet is going to offer a little bit more than Brady Hiestand will. If he has trouble defending the takedowns, then Hiestand should be able to win this fight. But where the odds are, I like Fernie Garcia in the matchup.
Hiestand open minus 135, minus 178 right now. Garcia open plus 105, plus 148. And we have a look at Fight Night picks for the total votes on this one. 50-50. Look at that. It's actually
insane.
One more vote for Hiestand. I have Brady Hiestand with a more complete package of a game, and I like his gas tank in these fights. And if you look at it for Garcia, great shots down the middle. I mean, you look at the that kind of crazy shot that he landed against Weems over on Dana White's Contender Series. That was a great win. But when Garcia came into the UFC, made that debut, I was quite disappointed from what I saw right there. So I did like the takedowns. I did like that out of Hiestand. I think Sick Jitsu and the Jiu-Jitsu that he's been practicing, at his home gym, really going to win out in this matchup against Garcia, who, on the flip side, is training at a Fortis MMA. So maybe he has some counters for all of that. We move into the next fight, Matt. You like the intensity out of this one. You loved it.
I was kind of surprised to see the animosity in the weigh-ins and during the face-offs. I gotta be honest, there was no pushing. It didn't get out of hand, but, they did kind of have to be separated after the fact. It was one of those weird face-offs where neither one of them wanted to look away, but, this isn't Poirier versus Chandler. This isn't Pereira versus Adesanya. I was surprised to see that level of intensity, but it is nice to see. And I do think it just does speak to the competitiveness of a lot of the fights on this card, because for Demopoulos and for Oliveira, I think it is weird. I think this is a case where you're going to have two very different careers for both these athletes coming into the UFC. I think there's a world where Demopoulos gets off to a little bit better of a start, is able to weaponize her cardio a little bit more, and just fight in a manner that is more Vanessa Demopoulos-y. And I know that's a weird thing to say for a fighter who only has, 12 professional fights, I believe, but still, she is a scramble-based fighter, and she is a unique fighter to just watch her skill set at. She just really has to get the fight into her ranges, and that's really always been the key for Demopoulos, because she is one of those weird tweeners where it does kind of suck that there's not an atomweight division in the UFC, because physically, I think she will struggle a lot with the women at this division. I just don't really know when that's going to catch up to her and become a consistent issue in a lot of these fights.
Maryna Oliveira looked good her last time out, and I see it over there, Lord Nikon, and we got the Chilean subscriber here. Big dub for the Warriors last night, so
they did beat the Knicks.
Andre Iguodala. I mean, Max Kellerman would take him. He was a big Iguodala guy.
The death beam pointed at the world. I'm taking Iguodala.
But when you look at this matchup, Matt, like Maria Oliveira definitely was able to show out a lot her last time out. She took on Gloria DePaulo, who was 6-4 at the time. Like that's the thing with Maria Oliveira. You can kind of pick it apart like you can with Brady Hiestand. You look at the wins and the losses. I mean, her fight against Julie Duarte, who went by another name in their fight. They're fighting in a gym. She was 0-1. They say it's by decision. She landed a knee. Like Anila Tabosa, 0-0, and then she fights Tabitha Ricci and then Gloria DePaula. So for DePaula, I mean, she went over. She fought with Invicta in that tournament earlier this week, lost by decision. Gloria DePaula now 6-6. So I don't know if I gain a lot there.
But
when you look at this fight, for Oliveira, she's not good on the ground. She's a decent striker. She has good volume. Again, look at her last time out. But for me, it's Demopoulos. Strength of schedule means something in lower level women's MMA. When you look at the odds here, Demopoulos open +130. We made our video. She was an underdog. She's now -107. Oliveira -114. Still the favorite. So it is close. It's gone close to the par. I do like Demopoulos. The thing that scares me, though, like you said, Oliveira, 9.5 inches of reach in this fight. So if she's able to just... You're not supposed to do it anymore.
Kind of big brother, you know?
No, but yeah, keep your fingers out there. Hold that lead hand position and then land your dominant shot. Go for it. And if you look at it for Demopoulos, she's great when it gets to the ground, but she has a hard time getting it to the ground. Her wrestling's not the best.
That's why I don't have the highest opinion of either one of these fighters, if I'm being honest. Like, I look at this fight opposite the way you look at the opening fight on this card. Like, I think Bleda could get into the top 15. She looks really good today. I gotta be honest, I don't even know how much we're going to learn about either one of these fighters in this fight, just because their skill sets are so different that if Oliveira is going to have success, it is obviously going to be on the feet. So I'm not going to be that surprised by it. And if Demopoulos is going to have success, of course it's going to come by way of grappling. And if you grapple Maria Oliveira, again, it's not like we're learning that much more about you. So I like Oliveira just because of the physical attributes that she has in the matchup, but this is not the highest level fight.
No, D-Rod DeOne's always in the chat every week saying, too many mites and thanks. I need guarantees, brothers. I need guarantees. Listen, I wish I was a wizard with a crystal ball for the future, but I can't. Like, I have a hard time sometimes predicting close to par, low level, completely outside of the rankings.
I gotta get really upset at this because this is one of your worst basketball takes of all time, that Boogie Cousins is gonna bring it back on the Houston Rockets. MPTV, you can make a championship team out of free agents in the NBA. If Boogie Cousins is your 5, you're going to give up 160 points a game.
Man, Boogie like 5 years ago.
He was good until he wasn't.
Ricky Turcios is taking on a guy in Kevin Natividad that's searching for his first win since 2020. And if you want mites and coulds and woods, this is the fight. I mean, for Kevin Natividad, his striking was definitely together in that fight that he had against Kyle Estrada with LFA. It was really coming together. Now, the puzzling things are, well, he loses to Glenn Baker, who's 3-2 and 36 years old, and he gets knocked out by a left hook. And that was kind of like a vision of things to come because he comes into the UFC, Miles Johns is able to do it. Bakary Dana is able to do it. Ricky Turcios doesn't strike like either one of those guys because Johns and Bakary just wait and load up on power. Exactly. And Turcios relies on volume, and you saw that a lot in Turcios' last fight. He had a terrible, terrible striking percentage against Amin Zahabi. He stayed on the outside, did that, like, crouch right hand.
And I wouldn't say we rate Amin Zahabi all that highly.
No, that's true. And so if you look at it for Turcios, he was a -225 in that fight against Zahabi, and he looked really bad. So a lot of people are off the train there. I'm still on it for a couple of reasons. Natividad primarily is a wrestler. You haven't seen that out of him, but primarily a wrestler. So if you do look at it for Turcios, when he gets taken down, and boy, does he have not that great takedown defense, he has decent jiu-jitsu, and he strikes a lot off his back, which I would normally say is terrible.
Yeah.
But for Turcios, that usually does lend him some points because he is able to damage up his opponents. I think Turcios is a better striker in this fight, but again, you have a look at the odds here. We'll have a look. Natividad, slight underdog, open +160, +133. Turcios open -185, -162. So we have a look at the votes, Fight Night picks for this fight. And in this one, 76% on Ricky Turcios to get the win.
And I understand why so many people did pick Ricky Turcios. Again, we brought this up a lot. He's one of the, I guess, more recent Ultimate Fighter winners who makes good use of his mic time, and that does really matter in this sport. But like I said previously, I don't really know how to rate that whole season of the Ultimate Fighter, and that's why today is a really good test, just because we're going to know just how good the finalists are. But I brought this up earlier this week, and I had a few people reach out to me and just ask me to, I guess, expand a little bit further on it. I said Ricky Turcios can have two very distinct careers. I think it could be someone like an Alex Caceres, or it could be like a Tony Ferguson. You have to remember, Tony Ferguson had like split decisions early in his career. Like, he wasn't the buzzsaw he was on that win streak just from jump. But you have to remember, guys like Alex Caceres are still good at everything, but not quite great at any one area. So if you are a specialist, you're going to be able to outwork them. I think Turcios could land into either one of those categories. And I'm really curious to see which one it is. I think you're right. I love his long-range strikes, but the problem is it's almost too long of a range for him. And he does have a difficult time finding the accuracy in some of his matchups. And I don't know if I'm just so low on him based on that last performance, and that's why I'm throwing up these red flags, because I think there is a really good fighter hidden within Ricky Turcios. I like his overall skill set. He's a very exciting fighter, and that takes you a long way. It's just a matter of, can he put those all together, because he's not as young of a fighter as you would like him to be.
Yeah, like if you look at Turcios, he has tons and tons of experience, but again, go back to his last 3 fights, and I don't care if you had 2 days to get ready for the fight. Dan Argueta is a wrestler boxer, so is Ricky Turcios. Dan Argueta had success in the second round of that fight with his takedowns. In round 1 and round 3, he got out grappled and outstruck. The fight against Ludwig Cholignan, like, these guys both made it to the UFC. Turcios was able to have success on the outside, and when they got into the pocket, he won out. And in the fight against Brady Hiestand, he went out with his striking. So in a fight with Kevin Natividad, that's why I have Turcios in this one. And we'll move into the next one, Matt, because we have Miles Johns versus Vince Morales. And you talk about people reaching out. There's some people reaching out this week saying, I have Vince Morales. And listen, I talked about it in the preview for this fight. Miles Johns was thought to be a top 15 fighter. He struggled in his debut against Cole Smith. He got finished by Mario Bautista. He got finished by Castaneda. Miles Johns is not a top 15 fighter right now. Vince Morales was on his way to being a top 15 fighter, and he was right there. And then he fought Jonathan Martinez and didn't win. But we learned a couple of things about Vince Morales. The guy's tougher than you thought at one point in his career. He's gotten better with his wrestling, and not just his wrestling. He was a good high school wrestler, college wrestler. His MMA wrestling's gotten better. And he's figured out the sweet spot of his power. So I definitely wouldn't sleep on Vince Morales in a fight like this.
And he has surprising power, too. You're right. He has found his sweet spot, because he doesn't look like he throws with everything behind his shots, but when he lands clean shots, they definitely have really good effect. But I agree wholeheartedly with what you said about Miles Johns. It reminds me of what people say about Anthony Davis when he's, like, not really at his peak. It's, hey, he is a top 5 talent. If you just look at his skill set, he could be a top 5 guy. But the problem is, he's yet to really be able to put everything together to then reinforce the idea that he can be a top 5 guy. I think Miles Johns is very similar in that capacity. Could he become a top 15 fighter with just his skill set? Well, probably. He has extremely heavy hands for the division. He is a good enough wrestler, I think, so that defensively he can keep those top tier wrestlers off of him, and he can definitely damage them with the hands. The problem is, can he finally put it all together and against high level of oppositions? Because at this weight division, you're fighting really good guys automatically too. Like, there is a big jump from just your unranked fighters to the ranked contenders. So I think for Johns, it is a matter of, wait, can he finally put it all together? Because every single fight of his is must-see TV. I think that's something everybody can agree on right now. It is kind of wild to me that he's buried on the prelims, because this is like fight of the night. Even people I know who barely know anything about MMA are like, oh, I've watched Miles Johns fight before. He's very exciting. So I know we both did pick Johns, but I can see a massive world where Vince Morales makes this a grimy fight where he is in it from the first minute until the last minute.
Yeah, and I mean, Miles Johns has all of the metrics that you like to see. Positive strike differential. He's above average in his strikes landed per minute. He's below average in strikes absorbed per minute. His defensive grappling is good. His offensive grappling is good. His cardio's not good.
True.
They're not going to show you that on the page because his third rounds are pretty damn tough. Castaneda fight, Smith fight, as he goes on with Bautista, and the Bautista shot was a really good shot, but the Castaneda fight was more, it just continued to accumulate, and he couldn't really change his game plan. He's kind of one of those guys, because he cruises on the center line, he throws his power punches, Morales moves around on the outside a little bit more. I've talked this whole time like I'm picking Morales. He is one of those good underdogs. Like, he opened plus 140, plus 143, John's open minus 160, minus 173, and John's a perennial favorite. I do have Johns ever so slightly because I do think his wrestling is a little bit better. I do think his striking is a little bit better. But the scary thing for me is Johns for this camp, Glory MMA and Fitness, and a little bit of Fortis MMA. I don't know what to think about Glory anymore. So I will take Johns ever so slightly. But if you like Morales as an underdog, this is a really close fight. Daniel's taking Morales, one of the better underdogs. Did you see his fight on Tough? I don't know what we're talking about. Choked in the debut. We're talking about Ricky Turcios. And Bob Collins is talking about Anthony Davis. Breaks his leg. Breaks his arms.
He's not a durable guy.
And Eric Cote saying John's on a full camp scares me. That is right. This fight was on short notice. And originally, it was supposed to be Jose Johnson, Matt's favorite guy. And on November 4th, you had Miles Johns stepping in on short notice. So do you
I like Miles Johns this match. But again, we put this on the fight of the night screen because we think it's going to be a crazy back and forth fight.
Maryna Moroz is ranked now because UFC rankings
Should she be?
arbitrary. And for Moroz, she's on a 3-fight win streak that lasts 3 years. Her last time out, she beat Maria Gopova. So if you look at the rankings, Jillian Robertson isn't ranked, and she beat Maria Gopova just now, but she's not ranked. But Maryna Moroz is, because it sells fights if you have numbers next to names. And if you look at this one, Jennifer Maia is ranked number 8. Now, her last 4 fights have been not so good. And listen, since she fought for the title, like her Jessica Ai fight, she barely won that one. So
it's not a Dominic Reyes streak, but it hasn't been a good one, that's for sure.
Nah, she hasn't been knocked out. So if you do look at it, for Maia, she's taking on Moroz. For Moroz, volume, she's become a grappler at ATT.
The ugliest kind of volume, though. Like, if you throw volume, think of a fighter like Nate Diaz, Max Holloway, someone who they throw 500 punches, but guess what? They land about 400 of those. They might miss a couple of times, but they are weaponizing not only their volume, but their pace as well. And that's how you really make use of being a volume puncher. You don't have that one-hitter-quitter power like a Francis Ngannou, so you really have to start accumulating these numbers. And for Maryna Moroz, you look at the numbers on a page, and you're like, oh my goodness, she is one of the great volume strikers of our generation. But then you break them down a little bit more. Yes, she throws a lot of punches, but she doesn't land a lot of punches, and that really is the frustrating thing. Even if she wins, and there have been fights in the past where, like, she's won a decision where I'm like, really? But it is... think about it this way. Aljamain Sterling is not nearly as good of a striker as Piotr Yan. I know we beat him the second time, but still, in the striking, Piotr Yan's way better. Aljo just throws a lot of punches, though, so when he's throwing punches, you kind of have to focus on your defense so you're not throwing back. That's how Maryna Moroz wins a lot of these fights. She's throwing so much volume that you just kind of have to focus more on your defense than your own offense. But I look at this fight as, if Maia gets into the match, she's the much better fighter. If Moroz can keep it on the feet, I think her volume is deceiving enough to get her a decision, and I know that's a wild thing to say, but this is a weird fight. Like, I never thought these two would meet each other in the rankings, because I thought Maia was going to be in the top 5 forever. I'm not going to lie.
Well, I mean, listen, there was a fight last night at the Bellator card, 288, and it was the heavyweight fight between Tyrell Fortune and Daniel James, and in the first round, Fortune holds James down. He gets hit on the feet early in the round, and at the end of the round, James is hammering away for 30 seconds on him. Judges D'Amato and McCarthy scored it 10-9 Fortune. They considered the control time over the damage, which is the opposite of what you're supposed to do. Those guys are pretty good. But if you do look at this one, yeah, I mean, Clay's saying Maia Bueno Silva's pretty good. Only other person to beat her was Fiorot, and that wasn't a total blow. Maia doesn't do stuff. I think Maia could win, but she won't because she won't do stuff. I think Maia gets this one into the clinch, and she's able to beat Maryna Moroz. Maia's able to crash that distance and beat Moroz. You crash the distance, you beat her. She needs space to work. And
but
if
like
you
what
see
you said to me earlier this week, when does Jennifer Maia fight like that?
In the fight that she had before she fought for the title against Wood.
Yeah, it's just like that's an isolated... I'm just saying, like, I'm surprised that Maia isn't more like that fighter that we saw, because she hasn't maintained the fight. Like, a lot of fighters can get to a title shot, but not every fighter can stay into the top 5 in the top 10 in the division. I thought Maia was going to be that fighter who was going to be a long-time top 5 contender.
To me, Maia being a plus 150 underdog seems a little bit ridiculous, and Maryna Moroz at minus 183, I think it's silly. If you're
step up for Moroz.
If you're betting minus 180 on Maryna Moroz, like, that's the silliest thing you could ever do. So for those reasons, Jennifer Maia, I think the pressure's going to win out in this fight. And for Maryna Moroz, she was a centerfold of a website that sells clothing now.
You've really been hung up on this.
It doesn't make any sense to me. So, Matt going Moroz, I'm going Maia. Charles Johnson, Zhalgas Zhumagulov, another one of those maybe what-if type of weirdo fights. Because if you look at this one, again, if every fight was a 5-round fight, Charles Johnson would win all of them. I bet you Charles Johnson could beat heavyweights if they just let him fight for long enough. But he's taking on a Zhumagulov that's going to meet fire with fire, because both of these guys excel in the same positions. Zhumagulov has better takedown defense, I would say, which could win it out. And I think he's got better power in his hands, so we'll see how this one goes. I like the kicks out of Johnson. And listen, I got to say this one, Matt. Oshi Kanlu, Craig is going to eat those words. I'll be there to remind him. You think I give a rat's behind about a women's flyweight fight about
you're
two
calling
fighters
after
by the
moved
bottom
on,
10?
so
I don't
think
give
so.
a good goddamn. Matt, in this fight, Zhumagulov taking on Johnson. Zhumagulov, most people thought he beat Jeff Molina's last time out, which lends credence to him getting a win over Johnson.
I want every single prospect that I have any opinion of to fight Zhalgas Zhumagulov, and this is why. He is a great
no matter the weight class?
He's a good filter. You know, like,
Yeah.
there's those coffee filters that you can put in a Keurig that you can, like, put your own grinds in. Some of them are really good, some of them are terrible. Zhalgas is that good filter, because if you are that top-tier prospect, I gotta be honest, even if you lose to him, it's still going to make you better in the long run, and that's why I don't really care about the Jeff Molina fight with him. Like, yes, I thought there was a really good argument for Zhalgas to actually win that fight, but still, I think Maryna's going to become a better fighter long-term because of that performance.
Brandor, Zhumagulov is my favorite fighter. He's going to knock him out.
Congrats, you made history and said something that nobody's ever said in the history of humanity.
Guy's got a bedroom full of posters of a Kazakh winner.
Got more than that in his bedroom. But for Zhalgas, he is just so well-rounded that's why I like him to fight a lot of prospects. If they're a good striker, he's going to wrestle them. If they're a good wrestler, like you said, he has good enough takedown defense to then force them to become a striker, and that's why I always like him fighting these prospects. And for Johnson, you can kind of get lost into the hype that he once had based off of his last performance against Maikaev, because Maikaev might just be the best fighter in the division, we just don't know it yet, and that is how highly I do rate Muhammad Maikaev, so I think Johnson is going to show us a much better version of himself in this fight. But it is kind of wild to me that if Zhalgas loses this fight, I don't really know where he goes from here, even though I hope the UFC doesn't get rid of him for what I just said. I think he is one of the best filters, regardless of divisions, to really find out who is one of the better fighters and who's probably not going to make it.
63% of the fans out Fight Night Picks going with Johnson to get the win. He's the favorite here, and again, there's a lot of fights on this card that feel like trap cards. Minus 170 for Johnson, Zhumagulov plus 138. This is one of the few favorites I have on the card in Charles Johnson, so I like him because he has that wrestling edge. He is so slippery, and he's not one of those guys in my mind's eye that gets held up against the cage. So that is the thing with Zhumagulov. He presses forward, throws power. The thing that scares me a little bit, though, Zhumagulov doesn't respond to getting hit very well, and I really like the kicks out of Johnson to all three levels. So for those reasons, I have Johnson. Kiko saying Johnson has that 5-round cardio. Yes, but it's not a 5-round fight. And that's a weird thing. Johnson's one of those guys that he can pace himself really well, and then in the championship rounds, he turns it on. But again, he does kind of struggle in round one. We saw that in the Horiuchi fight. We've seen that as of late, so maybe you do like Zhumagulov in this one, but it's an ever so slight edge to Charles Johnson.
I love watching Zhalgas fight, but I've got Charles Johnson as the pick.
And a lot of people going with Zhalgas. Both to know, Zhalgas is 1-3 or 1-4 in the UFC, LMAO. Yeah, a
tough fighter.
Arguably beat Raulian Paiva. He lost a split decision to Molina's last time out, and then he lost to Manel Kopp, and who was the other loss that he had? It was one where he got
But it's the even Zhalgas. He's going to be a tough fight to a lot of guys in the top 15. Am I going to sit here and tell you he's going to beat even 12 of the top 15 fighters? No, I'm not. But he's going to have a competitive fight with him. You're damn right he is. And that's why I think this will be a really fun one.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. Jack Della Maddalena's taking on Danny Roberts, Hot Chocolate. I don't have much to say about this one because a fighter's a minus 700.
This will just be the question I have for you. Let's say Jack Della Maddalena is able to get the win, and let's say he's able to do it impressively. Does the UFC then decide to do a big prospect versus prospect fight next, or do they try to give Maddalena maybe one of the more well-known veterans in this division? Because it does feel like welterweight's one of those divisions that has a lot of guys outside the top 15 who are kind of in that action fighter category.
Yeah, he gets an action fighter. I think Della Maddalena wins this fight, and he fights either Michel Pereira or Daniel Rodriguez.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I would like to see him be placed in that opportunity, because if you do beat a guy like Danny Roberts, I think it does place you not on a pedestal that you're an all-time great prospect, not by any means, but by this time, because Maddalena has had a few fights in the UFC, this will be his third win if he's able to get it. I think that's enough time for, like you've said, give him one of the more well-known fighters in the division, and then if you beat that guy, then we can start putting you into some of those more exciting matchups up near the top of the division, because think about a guy like Sean Brady. I know he just suffered his first official loss, and things, I guess in the case of fight, we're starting to trend in that way, but fighters can get the fast track when they're in that 10 to 15 fight range into the top 15 of this division, and I do think that if Della Maddalena is able to look impressive over Roberts, he'll be ready for somebody and then maybe a chance at the top 15.
Putting the money where his mouth's at. Zhumagulov for the win. Things gonna light him up on the feet. He never gives up too. Charles Johnson was a boxer. You want to know what Charles Johnson's boxing record was? 1-5-4. So yeah, and they bill him as a boxer in his fights, but he doesn't box. He throws kicks and barely throws his hands.
I'm excited. Brandor's is excited for that fight though as we are.
Yeah, that is there's a few. Okay, you want my favorite fights on this card? Della Maddalena Roberts, Fialho Salikov, the main event.
I like the co-main, to be honest. I feel like you haven't been as hyped up for the co-main event. I've been really excited for it.
No, Zhumagulov, Johnson, and then I want to see Turcios and Natividad. So, and Turcios is good, and we get excited about most of these fights. But yeah, that last fight is probably one of the better ones. Zach with a giant super chat. I've never commented, but watching for almost a year. Thank you. I was on a 9-0 streak, lost my last 4. Listen, I don't normally do this, but listen, that's much appreciated, Zach Bain, who never comments. The super chat's been going great today. Thank you so much, Zach, and good luck to you
Zach.
this week. Last week was definitely a great week. It seemed like for everybody, so this one's definitely a harder one to pick. Again, Della Maddalena in this one is a minus 700 favorite, so it is a little scary. And the votes, 90% have him at Fight Night Picks to get the win. It's just, I like the kicks out of Danny Roberts. We'll see maybe out of the stance switches from Della if Roberts able to pick up on that and work in his kicks. But for me, yeah, I do like Della in the fight. And to say that he hasn't fought a good level of competition, that last fight against Amiv where you get taken down, you get up, you finish him.
With a body shot.
That definitely is a telling one right there. So the next fight, Matt, Andrei Fialho take on Muslim Salikov. Both these guys finished in their last fights. The accumulation maybe for Fialho and for Salikov. Like, he looked good in the first round. He won the first round his last time out. What did you make of that?
Did he win or did Li Jingliang just not do that much in the first round? Like, for Jingliang, he was really just trying to set up that overhand right based on the body jab, so I don't really think he was going out there trying to throw a lot of volume winning the first round. That's the thing about Salikov. He gets more dangerous the more you try to press him, but we haven't seen that version of Salikov in a while now. Like you had mentioned, we see the wrestling a little bit more. We see him, honestly, I don't think he's gotten worse defensively by any means. He is still a good defensive fighter, keeps his hands up, can avoid eating those big shots, but when he does eat those big shots from a guy like Li Jingliang, who does have incredible punching power, we have seen him go down, and that's why I'll be very curious to see how he reacts to the pressure of Fialho, because I do think Fialho, he can get on the inside and really make him pay for it, but how willing is he to get into those types of firefights? Because even in his wins, and I was happy you brought this up going into the prediction video, like, you kind of forget about the performances just based off the results a lot of the times, but even in the wins that Fialho was having, like, he was getting hit by much lesser fighters.
Pereira fight is fairly even, even though Pereira had more volume in the fight. Fialho made his shots count. The fight against Miguel Baeza's landing 1-2s. He's landing a heavy right hand. They didn't rock Fialho, but they sent him back a little bit. Then he had to fight his way back in. He finishes him. The fight against Cameron Van Camp. A guy with a tattoo that says White Belt Gang on his chest, which is really weird. He rocks him. Thanks for that super chat again. I was asking for the oh my god. Okay, Zach Bain, now you put us in a friggin' pigeonhole.
He donated $50. I'm not gonna not do it.
Yeah, he's saying, I'm gonna put $500 on your biggest three-leg parlay.
Don't put $500 based on just my advice, but I can give you 3 fights that I'm sort of confident in.
Go for it, Matt. I don't feel comfortable, guys, doing that kind of stuff.
Again, don't bet $500. I like... Sergey Spivak's too big of a favorite, honestly. Canadian Chukwu's too big of a favorite. It is a tough fight to predict. Fialho we both have as an underdog. Again, that's a tough one. Putting a lot of money on it. I like Fialho, though, as an underdog based on this performance, and I'm kind of surprised to see where the odds are on this fight, especially, because for Fialho, I really felt like he was much more hyped up, so I expected him to be a big favorite going into this fight. I thought people would be more down on Salikov because he is a little bit older in his career. He's coming off a stoppage loss, too, so I'm surprised to see the odds so close. I really thought Fialho was going to be a big favorite coming into this one.
You made one. Like, guys, I don't like doing the parlays. I don't like doing that stuff. It's not my thing. Clay's saying I picked Fialho. I bet $1,000 on tennis, and then hits us up with another big super chat. Zach, bud, like, I started this video off saying that these fights are too close for comfort, and I picked a bunch of underdogs. So I'm sorry, Zach. Like, I really am. I appreciate the super chats. Like, you guys have no idea, but you're really pigeonholing me into doing something that's way too uncomfortable. So, yeah, I'm sorry, bud. You put me in a bad spot. I'm taking Fialho in the fight in this one because for Muslim Salikov, like, yeah, I don't like how he started to go towards the wrestling as his career's gone on, and it's not really the biggest part of his game. So, for me, I do like Fialho with the hands. Now, Fialho does struggle with the takedown defense, so it is a tough one. But, yeah, for me, I do have Fialho in the fight as the underdog.
Should be a fun fight. Again, if Fialho can be aggressive enough, I hope it does force a fun fight out of Salikov, because Salikov, if he is able to just fight on his terms, he's not the most aggressive guy in the world. He will throw really nice strikes here and there, throw very explosive strikes, but they don't always have the highest level of accuracy, so hopefully Fialho is the one leading the dance, because I think it will result in a great fight. I do.
All right, Matt, we'll move.
And last point, too, this is probably like the last chance for both guys to get in the top 15, at least for the time being, so this is a surprisingly important fight for both guys in their careers.
And that is true, and we talked about it. I mean, Pereira hanging around there. You got Dana Rodriguez, so the winner probably gets one of those guys. Waldo Cortez Costas taking on Chase Sherman. And Matt, for Chase Sherman, he's supposed to take on Josh Parisian a couple of weeks ago. For Waldo Cortez Acosta, he took on Jared Vanderaa a few weeks ago. And he looked really good in the first round. But then if you go as the fight went on, the second round was close. The third round was Vanderaa. So for Cortez Acosta, the scary thing for me in breaking down this fight is if you look at Chase Sherman and the fights that he wins, or at least the fights that he has that are competitive as they go along and he doesn't get finished in them, it's all about his leg kicks. And for Cortez Acosta, they're going to say, well, he was in the Reds organization. He got into a fight, and then he got into MMA, and then he got into boxing. And his boxing record, 6-4, and 3 wins by knockout and 3 losses by knockout. And I know I really talked about that, the Sonny Conto loss that he had, and I threw out that little soundbite where the wrestling or the boxing announcer's like, this guy doesn't really have a style. He's just an MMA fighter that started to box. And yeah, you don't like to hear that, but for Cortez Acosta, his footwork's good in MMA, his striking's good in MMA, his right hand is good, and Chase Sherman has a propensity to duck over to one side or the other as he tries to kind of peek out of the window to try and land his own shot. So super chat from Anthony Rivera Medina saying, the more I look at this fight, the more I see decision or a split. I think this one's going late, and that's why I like the underdog in Chase Sherman, because I don't think Cortez Acosta can shore up the fact that he hasn't had to defend leg kicks in his fights. And Chase Sherman, that's a big part of his game.
It is a big part of his game, but I don't think Sherman is going to do enough off those leg kicks.
Brandor with the super chat, wish you could have seen Sherman versus Parisian. Gut Sherman cost his record is sketchy at best. I disagree a little bit with that, Brandor, because if you look at the Thomas Peterson fight and you go back and watch that, Peterson's kind of one of those Parisian types. Like, he's well-rounded, LFA champ, he can wrestle, he can box. And Cortez Acosta got outstruck a little bit. He got taken down. And then at the end, he rallies, sends him backwards in the fight. Like, that was a Hail Mary win for Cortez Acosta there. And then if you look at the fight on Dana White's Contender Series, Danilo Suzarchi sucked. Like, his record was bad, and he was a bad fighter. And Cortez Acosta boxed his ears in.
This is my whole point. Is Chase Sherman that great? Like, Chase Sherman's not been on the greatest run of his career, and I know what he does well is just so happens to be a weakness of Cortez Acosta. He has really good volume, and that's the thing that really stands out for me about Chase Sherman. Like, Sherman does have good leg kicks, but he is a decent level athlete for a heavyweight. He kind of reminds me of the opposite version of Justin Ledet. I can't believe I'm bringing up Justin Ledet, but Ledet was a heavyweight who threw a lot of volume, but physically didn't really match into the division, and then moved down to 205, and his fighting style was more like a light heavyweight, even though he didn't have a lot of success there. For Sherman, he throws a lot more volume than you would assume kind of a TKO-based heavyweight would, but I still think that volume makes him available to be hit, and I think that's going to be his big issue in this fight.
Cortez Acosta open minus 160, minus 242 right now. Sherman open plus 140, plus 196. There's a couple of people I got to hit up that are over there in the chat, so give me a second. 72% of Cortez Acosta to get the win. Anthony Rivera Medina, they just wanted to sign a Dominican fighter. I mean, again, he did look good in that fight against Suzarchi, but Suzarchi was a big underdog, and he was outmatched. Prince Albert, Saskatchewan here, where if there were a matchup between our winners and yours would win. Be a good fight, though. Good show, gentlemen. So for Ryan, I drove up to Quebec this week, and northern New Brunswick had 25 centimeters on Sunday, and then they had another 25 centimeters during the week. So winter is in full effect in like the, Gaspésie and then also northern New Brunswick. It's it's cold.
It was weird though. It was like 20 degrees here 2 weeks ago, and now there's snow on the ground.
Last Saturday, before the show, I hung the Christmas lights on the roof. I went up top, and then I mowed the lawn. And then it got really cold and snowed. So yeah, it's really, really weird.
Very
that way.
strange. But yeah, that's my whole thing about this fight. And we brought this up a lot in the prediction earlier on in the week. Cortez Acosta had one of those stock losing wins his last time out, where I thought he was going to be a much more refined heavyweight, if you will, by the time he came to the UFC. I thought we were really going to see his boxing showcased in that first fight. We weren't able to see that, but I still don't think that his stock has dropped enough in my mind for him to now lose to Chase Sherman.
Sherman Island fights, BKFC experience, a little bit similar there, but again, 14 kicks versus Arlovsky, 33 versus Porter, 19 versus Vanderaa. And then we go, Mr. Guy saying, what does pop and popcorn fight mean? Mr. Guy, that's been a term for a while. Pop and popcorn fight, you stay away from it, which is like all the fights on this card because they're really, really close. It's just one of those cards. Pop and popcorn fights. The next one. So we're split on that pick. I have Sherman, you have Cortez Acosta. Iwan Kutsilaba, Kennedy in Sechukwu. Matt, a lot of people going with Kennedy this week. He's the hotness. Really, really hot is Kennedy in Sechukwu. He's got the height advantage. He's got the reach advantage. Canada, whatever happened to Gavin Tucker? He corners fighters for Fight League Atlantic sometimes.
He came into the UFC a little bit late. I think that was his big issue. For Gavin Tucker, he was billed as a big-time prospect because he didn't have a ton of professional fights. But the thing was, when he came to the UFC, he was in his early 30s at that point, so it was tough for him to really get a great run.
Classical Andrew. Hey, dudes, I'm from Anchorage, Alaska. You guys ever visited the Northern Neighbors? Classical Andrew. Wow. I went to Regina in June. And it's 2 hours from here to Toronto by plane, and then it's like, 5.5 to get to Regina? My answer is no. That's a long ride. And you guys, the wilderness is great. The thing that you guys have over us is the mountains. But similar-ish summers, similar-ish winters. You guys probably get a little bit colder. It is what it is. Anthony hitting up the super chat again. Connecticut guys, shout out to Poetan. But geez, Northeast weather sucks. And his sister didn't have a good debut. But Poetan, he lost his debut as well. So when it comes down to this one... the dentist didn't in such a cool look, very hesitant his last time out.
That is the thing with him, though. He does kind of have that switch of, I'm going to be really aggressive this fight, or, it's going to take me a second to really settle into the fight. And that's always been the thing with Kennedy. I think the skills are there. It's just a matter of, can he actually unleash them? And for Ion Cutelaba, it's weird, because he is at this sort of, hey, how many more chances are you going to get against, top 15 guys and relevant fighters?
Nomad Gladiator, you fellas ever come to Newfoundland? Yeah, man.
I've never been.
You guys have Black Horse Beer, which is arguably 1-2 best beer of all time. It's Molson Export and then Black Horse. And you can buy one of them here, but you can't buy the other one. So that is what it is. Bunkoots! I'm from Sask. Right, bros, it's cold today. It definitely is out there.
That's the thing. You get, the cold weather there is so much worse than what we get.
Yeah, because you have a dry cold.
Yeah, we get 17 feet of snow, so it's a little bit worse in that capacity, but I hate the cold weather.
So for me in this fight, Kenny Nzechukwu definitely look great. Clay brings up a really good point. We got 420 Blaze hanging out in the chat right now.
Okay.
Only 78 likes. You can get those up there. But when it does come to this one, Kennedy looked really good against Carl Robertson. Carl Robertson, the weight cut every friggin' fight out.
It's always a conversation.
Not really a 205er, more of a middleweight. And he's known as a grappler, which is weird because he's a kickboxer. Carl Robertson didn't really know what he was. And in that fight, Kennedy looked really good. For Ion Cutelaba, Extreme Couture, for me, it's the fact that if he gets it down, he's got to get it down and done quick. And he's got to get it down and done and get into that range very quickly. Because for Kennedy, coming into the UFC, it was his kicks were so good. His range strikes were good. In the UFC, it's been more the close distance boxing, but I think Cutelaba's got him beat in a couple of those spots.
This is the question I have for you, though. Do you get a little bit more concerned about the defensive grappling of Ion Cutelaba, though, based on the last performance? We've seen him get taken down by the likes of, Jared Cannonier. And Jared Cannonier's
decent with his wrestling. It's a point that we bring up is, that's the ace in his back pocket.
Jared Cannonier's okay at wrestling. Really, the only fight we point to with that is the Cutelaba fight, so I'm going to disagree with you on that. My thing with Cutelaba is, we've seen him struggle defensively wrestling in the past. Not really as much lately. He has really looked a lot better with his own wrestling, but defensively with his own defensive grappling, I just think that now we have seen both of those sides together. I'm curious as to whether or not Kennedy might even go for a takedown and try to get on top, because he is such a massive physical force that if he's able to get on top of Ion Cutelaba, and Cutelaba's really trying to use his strength to escape those positions, I think he's going to struggle a lot.
James Lloyd with the super chat. Gentlemen, thanks for doing the research, laying out the facts. I love your opinions, watch regularly, and still bet against your opinions regularly, and that's fine.
That's basically the key. Just watch the videos, listen to the information that we have to say. That's really what the majority of this is. We might get the pick right or wrong, but we just want, the fight to kind of follow the script that we think it will.
That's why we're not going out on leg. Oh, plus 300 parlay. You gotta go with it. Kenny Nzechukwu, open at par, minus 175. Cutelaba, par, now to plus 144. We have a total look at the old votes at Fight Night Picks in the poll. 62% with Nzechukwu. For me, I thought Kennedy beat Nicolay. Just Nicolay,
yeah.
I thought he won that fight, and then he looked really good against Robertson. He very well could be rolling. You have fighters out of that camp on this card. You also have Extreme Couture represented close to home. So I have Cutelaba here. For Kennedy, I see Bananas and Grapes. Yeah. They think the takedown's going to come into it. For Kennedy, it's going to be ground and pound out of the takedown. I think Cutelaba's going to be able to sweep out of it. I know Kennedy is a giant light heavyweight, but I don't think Kennedy has those skills on the ground. Johnny Walker was able to show his last time out, and I didn't think Johnny had those either. But for me, I still do have Cutelaba. I think he's going to come into this game, or come into this fight, with a different plan that he had against Spann, than he had against Johnny Walker, where Cutelaba from moment go, and I know it worked for him in that fight against Enrique, where he just he went like balls to the wall off the hop, but against Spann and against Walker, he tried to go galaxy brain and just try and go 2 steps instead of 1, and he really did struggle. I think he's, fighting for the job, and I think he's going to be able to get it done.
I agree with you that he's fighting for his job. I just think it's difficult for a fighter at this stage of his career to reinvent himself for now being like the 4th time in his career. Maybe he is able to do it. We've seen him do it before. It's just Cutelaba's not as young in his career as you probably like him to be. Like, he did have one of those weird, like, cult hero kind of rides. Remember when he wore the Bret Hart sunglasses in Calgary? Like, that was really cool.
Yeah,
like,
and then he had EPO.
Then he had that whole weird drug. But still, the thing about Cutelaba was, for a little point in time, he was somebody's favorite fighter, and that matters. Like, not everybody can say that. Zhalgas, Zhumagulov can say that, but not everybody can say that. I think Cutelaba 5 years ago was that guy for some people. I like Kennedy, though. I think he will kind of be that next step in the division. I like his physicality, too. I think he will be the much bigger guy. I'll be curious to see, though, who's going to go for the offensive takedown, because I think both guys are going to have success if they get into the top position, just who's going to get there. So I like Nchekwu in this fight, but I think it's a fun one.
Do you think there's somebody out there watching a Zhalgas fight going like, men were meant to ride with cloud between their knees?
I just think of Zhalgas Zhumagulov's like the song I Was a Highwayman. Like, if there was a 5th member in that, it was I Was Zhalgas Zhumagulov.
Anthony talking about one championship. I watched Bellator 288 and I was falling asleep between round 4 and round 5. Nemkov versus Anderson, so I missed the fight against Christian Lee and saw the highlights today. But Brandor hot and heavy over 5 for Fighting. Man, what a band. Derek Lewis is taking on Sergey Spivak in the main event. And again, a lot of people talking about Derek Lewis, the just get up attitude. The wins that he has over Volkov, or the one that he has over Marcin Tybura. He has beaten wrestlers. The fight where any other man would have tapped against Alexei Oleinik in the old Big Brother choke, but Derek didn't, and he ends up getting the win. Daniel, Nikolai is pronounced Nicolae. It's funny having Americans trying to pronounce Romanian names.
Oh, don't get Craig started. There's nothing that sets him off worse than when you call us Americans.
Daniel, buddy, like, what flag do I have right behind me? What country am I from? I'm not an American, pal. And the other part about it, I pronounce his last name the right way, and then I get demonetized by YouTube because they think I'm saying a slur. So that's just the way it goes.
This is a weird fight, though, because this fight is either Derek Lewis is going to have all the success on the feet, because this is the thing. Sergey Spivak has become a better striker. I still don't think he can strike with Derek Lewis for extended periods of time in this matchup. And if he does, it's going to give Derek Lewis the opportunity to land quite possibly the biggest single shot we've ever seen in the UFC. Like, Derek Lewis is on that level with Francis Ngannou, to where, like, hey, it genuinely only takes one. And I know people love saying that it only takes one punch. Derek Lewis is like the ultimate, it doesn't matter how much success you have throughout the fight, you can be up 4 rounds to none. He is always going to have that chance. That's the thing about Lewis. You look at him, you don't think he's this crazy athlete. He carries his power late, though. He has deceiving cardio for the size of him. That's something you always have to bring up, because he will huff and puff from the first minute of the fight, but he will throw with the same amount of volume and explosion in the 4th and 5th round. I still think this fight's going to get there. I just think for Lewis, we've seen him have enough bites at the apple of the top 15 opponents, and at this point, we have started to see a regression of skill sets, and I think that's fair to say. I know he's only lost to the top tier guys, so maybe that is unfair for me to say, but I think Spivak has made the improvements, especially on the mat, to where he can finish Derek Lewis.
To me, you look at Derek Lewis, and let's just go back, sample size of 3 fights. Fights Chris Dawkins. What does he do? Baits him in, blasts him. Then he fights Tai Tuivasa. What does he do? Baits him in, eats the elbows, crumpled against the cage. And then
but tried to set up the big shot.
And you know, like we talked about it, in the Apex, he's undefeated. So Derek Lewis has a little bit of a weird hometown discount type of feel in that regard. But if you do look at it for Lewis's last time out, 55 seconds was all it took for Sergey Pavlovich to walk across and finish him. And does Sergey Spivak fight like Pavlovich? No. Because Pavlovich is just like a mean, lean, green. If he fought more often, who the hell knows? But he is one of those guys that goes out there and finishes fights. For Spivak, though, he's got to work on that takedown. And again, calling a spade and MMA math. But if you look at it for Spivak against Tuivasa, it was threat of the takedown early and often, punishing him on the mat, and going back out there. I think Spivak has good cardio. Is it 5-round cardio? We'll find out. But I think his cardio can actually win him out a 5-round fight. I think it's more conducive to a 5-round fight than Lewis's weight and bait and shot. 48% at Fight Night Picks going with Spivak to win. On Instagram, but 58% here in the YouTube chat have Spivak to get the win.
I like how close the votes are, too, because it means that, A, it's an exciting fight because of how competitive it is, but that's the thing for Spivak. We have seen him fight a lot of the top-tier guys at this point in his career. He, at least early on, was a bit of a slow starter. If you get to him early, really hit him with some power shots, he would become a much lesser version of himself, but he just seems a lot more dedicated to his game plan. Like, I don't look at Sergey Spivak and think, wow, his skill set is completely different than the fighter we saw when he came into the UFC. Yes, he's gotten better and he's really fleshed out different parts of his skill set, but for the most part, it's I'm going to box my way into the clinch, I'm going to try to take you down, and once I get into that top position, I'm a very lethal fighter. He just seems a lot more dedicated to getting the fight into the clinch and then the takedown, and we all know that once Spivak gets on top of guys, he might not be the best at ground and pound into submissions, but he is of that tier, and that's why I think Sergey Spivak's going to be able to get the win.
Malone Hart with a giant super chat. Sorry for being late. Well, Malone Hart, definitely appreciate that.
Thank you, Malone.
There's still time. We'll go back through the card. Mike Ross needs fantasy football help. Chase Edmonds or Elijah Moore. I mean, I have 3 Dolphins on the bench this week, and Tua, Waddle, and oh boy, Jeff Wilson Sr. Thanks for dropping him, guy in the league.
I just want to say, I have the greatest 8th round pick in fantasy football history, and it was Tua Tagovailoa. And a bunch of people were like, he's terrible, he's not going to be good. That MFer's playing like an MVP right now.
Yeah, I'm worried though because I've got Lamar and Mark Andrews, and they're both questionable.
I just bought a Jalen Waddle jersey.
They're both questionable. Oh, big Jalen Waddle guy.
He's so good.
So when it does come down to this one, there are a couple other ones that I wanted to get to. Lord Nikon said, Black Hole Sun, won't you come? I'm going to throw a challenge out there to everybody. Listen to Black Hole Sun with just your left earbud in. It sounds like there's a ghost in your ear, so that's one thing. The other thing, creepy, because Lord Nikon, before this, I was going through bands that I like to listen to before shows. They are one of them, but instead we listened to the musical stylings of Scott Weiland and STP. So Creep is a good song to get you started with the show, and that's what we listen to. Leo with the super chat, what's good, my Canadian bacon bros? Also creepy because I just ate bacon before the show. Let's lay it to rest. Thick cut hickory smoked old-fashioned American bacon, Canadian bacon.
They're very different.
I don't like American bacon that much.
Really?
Yeah.
They're just too different in my mind. Like, you use them for very different things. If I'm gonna make like a ham and egg, for instance, in the morning on a bagel,
then use
I want
American.
Canadian.
Oh, sorry.
I want Canadian bacon if I want that, because it's much more like ham. If I'm just having like a traditional eggs and bacon type of breakfast, then I want that American bacon.
Yeah, Canadian bacon's always a fun one to mingle with, and Brandor says Canadian bacon there. So Matt, as it goes with Fight Night Picks question mark kicks, the super chat's been great. The chat's been going crazy. We're gonna rip on down through this one more time. Brandor saying Canadian maple syrup.
That's something we guys have you beat on, and it's not even close. Our maple syrup's the best.
The same climate goes through Vermont.
I understand.
And they also have sugar maples. But what I will say was I was in Quebec City again this week, and I had maple sugar on my pancake. Oh my God, it'll change your life. So that one was a little bit wild.
And like culturally, it's into the cooking too. It's great stuff.
Oh, the old maple syrup. Natalia Silva is taking on Tereza, Bleda, and James 37. Recap the final picks, please. We do it every week.
Do we have a segment of the show for you? I like Bleda on this one.
I like Bleda, but if Silva looks like she did her last time out against Jazz Divisius, she has to fight a ranked opponent like Tracy Cortez next.
I think that's a really good point, but I also have Bleda.
She looked amazing her last time out. Garcia versus Hiestand. I have Brady Hiestand, and one of the few favorites I have on this card.
I have Fernie Garcia. I just think he's the slightly more damaging striker. I'm going to be curious to see how his takedown defense holds up, because that's the thing about Hiestand. He is a very good wrestle boxer, but I think for as long as this fight's on the feet, I like Garcia.
Tim Hortons or watch Carlos Esparza fight Ghosts? I'd rather watch Carlos Esparza fight Ghosts. I hate Tim Hortons.
I don't mind Tim Hortons, honestly.
The food tastes like they put garlic powder like our Uncle Darren in everything, and their coffee's very acidic and gross. Malone Hart, Canada also has the best steaks at Epcot. Maybe it's Alberta beef. We're split on that pick. Demopoulos taking on Maria Oliveira. I have Demopoulos, the former LFA champ, to beat Oliveira.
I have Oliveira in this fight. She has a 9-inch reach advantage. I think that's going to be quite significant in this matchup, but I don't have the highest of opinion on either one of these fighters.
Canadian bacon, maple syrup, hash browns, and Zhumagulov for the pick. Put out the blue slushies and popcorns.
I mean, Brandor's trying to become the
hold
third
on.
member all of a sudden. He just likes what we like.
Time out, Brandor. Wasn't Blue Slushy like a callback to an episode we had like months ago?
I think so.
What was the Blue Slushy thing? Oh, that was Tony Ferguson. He was like, get your Blue Slushies and the popcorn. That's it, Brandor. That's a good throwback when you got to think about it. Do you guys have a French background? Because, you know, Canadian. Toute la semaine passée, je parlais en français au Québec. So, oui.
Got this.
Je parle en français. Turcios, Natividad. Je vais avec Ricky.
Turcios, but
Turcios.
If Turcios and Hiestand both lose, then the Elephant Fighter was a waste of all of our times. I'm just saying that right now.
Yeah, well, it feels like it. I hate it. Matt, Miles Johns, Vince Morales. It feels like a trap card. I have Johns here, but I don't like it.
Johns, but again, if you like a fighter and something that you think is going to be the fight of the night, then you don't really like that fighter all that much. This is going to be a great fight for as long as it lasts, but I also have Johns.
Maia, Moroz. I have the former title challenger. I think the line's salty.
Moroz, but I don't like anything about the pick. I like her volume, and I like that her volume doesn't let her get hit, but I still don't like her in the fight.
Hypocrites, no! You guys absolutely suck!
They're like Chael Sonnen talking to Anderson Silva.
We went 11-3 last week. We suck. Charles Johnson's taking on Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Brandor has Zhumagulov. You guys got to know that. But we have Charles Johnson. Does that now scare you how much Brandor has Zhumagulov?
It's Brandor and about 6 women who do. I like Charles Johnson, though. Again, I feel like we saw a good prospect have an awful performance against a great prospect his last time out. But I do expect Johnson to kind of reset his trajectory and look like the fighter we thought he would his last time out.
I got to check out Hypocrites Now's YouTube channel. It's probably pretty good if ours sucks. Jack Della Maddalena's taking on Danny Roberts. Hot chocolate. No, it's not.
I have a hot take. Do you want it?
I think I have bacon hot chocolate powder in the cupboard back there.
You always get, like, dodge around. I think Jack Della Maddalena right now is the best prospect outside the top 15. I know Ian Gary also has a claim to that right now, but for me and what I've seen, I've watched every single Jack Della Maddalena fight, the losses early in his career and the win streak he's gone on. I really do feel like we are seeing a fighter who can get into the top 15. Now, is he going to maintain top 15 status forever? That's a really difficult thing to predict just because the welterweight division has always been a strong division. It feels like the welterweight division, it's never the best, it's never the division that gets the most shine, but it's never completely absent of contenders, and that's what I really like about 170. I think Della Maddalena, maybe not after this win, maybe not after the next fight, but at a certain point, I think he will prove against probably Ian Gary. I feel like that's the fight they're trying to set up.
Bunkoot saying Old Dutch kettle cooked jalapeno and cheddar chips mixed with Hawkins cheesies. Thank me later. People from out west love Old Dutch. People in the Maritimes aren't 100% on Old Dutch because the trouble is, like, everybody likes kettle cooked. We know this, and you can buy the big bag of Cape Cod if you're at Costco. But then, of course, you have the local stuff, like out of Heartland.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
I used to hate ketchup chips, fun fact. But then I opened my eyes to how glorious of a snack they were.
Ketchup chips, good stuff. Covered Bridge is the potato chip I'm referencing. Andrea Fialho taking on Muslim Salikov. I have the younger Fialho. This should be a great fight. It's on our Fight of the Night screen.
And again, this is a really important fight for both guys. I know that might come as a surprise because these are both very good fighters, so we're not the kind of entry level whatsoever. But for Fialho and for Salikov, they're both close enough to the top 15 that an impressive performance this time out might get them an opponent that could then get them a ranked spot. But if you get finished again in this fight, it's probably it for your chances.
The winner
to be
has
ranked.
A competitive fight with Neil Magny. Neil
Magny
did not accept punches very well against Daniel Rodriguez before he got him to the mat his last time out. Cortez Acosta, Sherman, going with the dog.
I like Cortez Acosta, but again, Cortez Acosta is really going to have to show me something he didn't show me his first time out for me to then kind of reassess and think he is the fighter I thought he once was. But again, beating Chase Sherman's not going to prove all that much to us, I don't think.
Armin, I'm going to take a picture of what you just said because I'm going to have a hard time finding it, but I got to try Portuguese poutine at Ma Poule Moyer. I'll have to give it a go. I went to, what's the name of it? There 2 weeks ago. Oh my goodness. I went to Walensky's Light Lunch a couple of weeks ago, Armin. What do you make of that one? I had a special. It was very, very good. The next fight, Iwan Kutsalab is taking on Kenny Nshekwu. I have the underdog, Iwan Kutsalaba, in the matchup.
I like Kenny Nshekwu. I really do think he is going to pose a lot of issues for Kutalaba. I think Kutalaba can have success, but I think he's going to have to burn a lot of energy to then have that success. And the weird thing about Kennedy, for being as big of a fighter as he is in this weight division, you would assume he has to cut a tremendous amount of weight and then really suffer cardio-wise, but he has great output. He has really good volume, and I think it could help him as the fight goes
I don't
late.
say these things very often, and it's not a part of the Fight Night Picks thing. Kenny Nshekwu seems like the nicest guy. Like, he's the guy you want your daughter to date. Like, he'd bring her home right at 10 o'clock. He'd tip the waiter. Like,
he'd call you like Mr. Allen, not
He'd call
Craig.
you sir. He'd open the door. Kenny and Shukwu, just the nicest guy in the world. And then in the last fight of the night, Derek Lewis taking on Sergey Spivak. This is going to be a good fight, and I don't know what to think about it, because if you look at it for Derek Lewis, he wins. You fight like another rising guy.
Because that's the thing. Where does he go? He has straight up fought everybody in the top 15. He is in a rare position. Normally, you'll have fought a lot of fighters.
Rosenstrike. He hasn't fought Rosenstrike. And Rosenstrike has a fight coming up, but yeah.
And that's a fight where win, lose, or draw with Biggie Boy. Like, it doesn't really matter what the result is. You can throw him and Derek Lewis in there whenever you want to and make that like the co-main event of a fight night.
All right, so in this fight, I do think that Sergey Spivak is going to get the win. I just think it's a combination of the skills against Derek Lewis. Branch above, Lewis via early knockout. Matt, the first one that we ever went to, the first card, was UFC Halifax down in Nova Scotia at the then Metro Center before Scotiabank. And we had great seats.
Did.
And
a guy was so drunk he passed out in front of us, woke up as Travis Brown was walking to the cage, screamed, "Travis loves Ronda," and then fell asleep for the rest of the main event. Those were the scenes in Halifax.
Some dude on Dana White's Contender Series in the chat once. Yeah, it was Darius Flowers. And the day before his fight, as I was still... Like, I had COVID when I was doing that show. I was sweating bullets and sick as a dog, and I said, "Sorry, Darius, I'm taking your opponent." And Darius won that fight.
Sean O'Malley was also in the chat once to tell us he was still undefeated.
Yep, and he wasn't. So, in this one, though, yeah, we saw Derek Lewis beat Travis Brown, and then after the fight, we stuck around because we wanted to see a little bit of the post-fight stuff. We were trying to walk back to the hotel, and Maro Yamasaki and Keith Peterson were lost.
They
couldn't find the Delta, but guess what? There's two Deltas. At that time, there were two Deltas. One waterfront, one slightly not waterfront. Trent, love the show. Thoughts on the parlay? Turcios, Johns, Johnson.
I have all three of those fighters.
Yeah, I don't feel terribly confident in Johnson, but yeah.
I feel more confident in Johnson than I do Turcios, if you want the honest opinion. So there you go. We've both thrown up red flags about two of the three. I just think for Turcios, it really is a matter of... Once you show me, then I'll start to believe. And for him to do it consistently at the UFC level, I think he's going to really have to round out his game. But maybe he could show us that today.
Pablo wants to know where you can buy the shirt. Pablo, I printed off. Like, I just did those stealing picks, peeling sticks. But you iron it on your shirt. So I actually printed this one the wrong way.
But like VT just said, that's probably like Ricky Turcios' fan club's motto. We love Ricky, but we do not bet on him.
That's the way to go. And one more. Justin Villegas saying, "Can you give us your favorite dish to eat?" Yeah, a Dick Ann's burger. And Buddy from earlier from Montreal is going to get what I'm talking about.
There's a restaurant in our city that does insane chicken shawarma. It's called Biblos. Shout out. There you go.
Yeah, Biblos is really good. So, Matt, big card. Thanks to everybody for all of the super chats.
Yeah, thank you guys. I was not expecting this to be as big of a show as it was, but I'm really glad that you guys are excited for this card.
Apologies, because if, and I can't go back far enough in the chat. Apologies to Zach Bain, because he really put me on the spot for a big-time parlay. I'm sorry, but, yeah, that's just not the way she goes. Brandor, change your Johnson pick heading out. Have a great one. Not going to happen. Appreciate everybody that tuned in this week. There's no UFC event next week. PFL is their championships. I'm away on vacation from like midweek to midweek. So the card afterwards is going to be a little weird and it's going to come out at a later date. We might even just do a question mark kicks for the next fight night card because I'm away and guys, like it's Canada. Thompson versus Holland is the next card. So it's from Orlando.
I can't believe Wonder Boy's still getting consistent main events.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. But we'll do something different. I haven't taken a vacation since February 2020, so I'm just turning my brain off and vacationing. Matt, thoughts?
I'm trying to get tickets to see Luka Doncic play basketball.
Oh, Daniel, sorry for calling you Americans. Daniel, I appreciate your apology. It's all good. Listen, everybody enjoy this Lewis card. We're either going to sink or swim with the amount of close fights there are.
I'm excited for the card, though. Like, I'm actually really amped up to watch this one. I think we're going to get a lot of fun fights.
Where am I going? VGK. Let's go. Matt, everybody's going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.
Place